Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at a rare configuration called enclosure. This is something that's happening right now for Venus, who is sandwiched temporarily between the rays of Saturn and Mars. Um, this is a traditional concept, so we're going to talk about what it is, how to identify it in a birth chart. We're going to talk about something called intervention or how the enclosure might be broken up or mitigated, and then also what to expect from this transit, which will be around until Venus conjoins Mars. This is also a way of perhaps a more traditional way of looking at what might be described by Venus coming into a square with Uranus right now as well. So, anyway, I thought you guys might like to see this. It's kind of a rare configuration. It's definitely worth like talking about and understanding it. It'll definitely up your game as an astrologer to know what it is. So here's the traditional view of the planets, just the traditional seven. And what I want to illustrate for you is that Venus right now is sandwiched between the rays of Saturn and Mars. So Saturn shoots its ray from 1158 Aquarius right behind Venus at 1158 Leo. And then on the other side, you have Mars at 1614 Leo. And Venus is therefore right in between them. Now, in order for this is called a malefic enclosure. It could be a benefic enclosure if you had a planet sandwiched between Venus and Jupiter. But when you have a malefic enclosure, it means temporary hardships or difficulties, kind of being stuck between a rock and a hard place for whatever planet is sandwiched between the malefics or their bodies or their rays, and whatever the planet indicates in the birth chart or whatever the planet's topical significations are. For example, Venus in your birth chart might rule the house of siblings, or it could rule the house of home, family, and property. But Venus also topically or naturally, will represent things like love and beauty. So whatever Venus signifies both by its own nature, say love and beauty, or whatever Venus signifies by house rulership or placement in your birth chart, those topics, when you're looking at an enclosure in a natal chart, or when you're looking at a transit like the one we're seeing in the sky right now, could indicate rough times for Venus. So that's the general concept. Now, how is an enclosure broken apart? The only thing that could break apart an enclosure would be if a planet were sending its rays somewhere, in between these planets. So there was another planet in between them by body. And there isn't in this case. So it's a pretty clean example of an enclosure, and will suggest difficulties all the way up for Venus, all the way up until Venus conjoins with Mars, which will happen by about, let's see, we're looking at Monday into Tuesday, the 12th into the 13th. So between the 12th and the 13th, the enclosure is broken because Venus conjoins with Mars. And you might have heard me say in some previous videos this week that we're really seeing Venus go through the same gauntlet that Mars had to run last week between Saturn and Uranus, and this kind of T-square energy. And when they finally get together, Saturn and Mars, or excuse me, Venus and Mars, when they finally come into a conjunction with one another, things that have been challenging will start to smooth out. And if Venus has been going through difficulties, you'll start to see Venus recovering. Okay, so now, what can we take from this in terms of what to watch for? Well, first, it's important to understand that enclosures are somewhat rare. So if you see one in your birth chart, you don't want to rush to conclusions about them. Have an astrologer look at it for you, first of all, because sometimes people get freaked out by it. And oftentimes, depending on the context of the chart, it's really not the end of the world. You may also have interventions that you're not able to spot, in which case it really isn't the end of the world, because mitigation in the case of an enclosure will make truly lighten the load that the malefics might be placing on a planet through that malefic enclosure. What does it indicate? Generally speaking, you have Saturn, a principle of separation and division, as well as kind of hardness and severity. So you're running up against kind of the cosmic red light with Saturn. And then you have Mars, who severs and cuts and confronts and tends to bring confrontation and hostility or frustration. So Venus will go through that feeling of limitation and constraint kind of back and forth, along with conflict or confrontation for a little bit here up until Venus conjoins Mars, at which point then you're looking at the kind of marriage of the Venus Mars qualities. And the marriage of those qualities is a really positive thing because you're going to start to see resolution, compromise, peace, harmony, agreement, healing. So, but a little bit of a process between now and then due to the enclosure. Now, from a modern standpoint, someone may not notice or know that concept and still be able to see that Venus is going through some rough times because of the simultaneous aspect to Saturn and then Uranus. So someone might, a modern astrologer who doesn't use these traditional concepts might look and say, hey, look, Venus going through the opposition to Saturn, the square to Uranus, and then finally conjoining Mars, that alone could kind of give you the picture of Venus going through a bit of a rough time. But this traditional concept really does the same thing. So one of the things that I teach my students in my programs is how to be able to do astrology without necessarily having to use the outer planets. Of course, that's not to say that we shouldn't use the outer planets or that they don't add their own unique qualities. So at any rate, who might it be particularly difficult for? Well, I would say like on a sort of monthly horoscope level, if you're a Taurus or Libra rising and Venus is therefore your ascendant ruler in your birth chart, that could be a little bit more tough on you personally or physically or emotionally or mentally, because that planet's going to be a little bit more, you're going to be a little bit more personally identified with that planet. So anytime that planet goes through big changes in the sky, the people who have the ascendant ruler, like if, same thing goes for any other really intense aspects from other planets that rule other signs, big Mercury retrograde with lots of stuff going on like we had last month, maybe a little bit more acute for Gemini and Virgo rising. So similarly with this Venus action going on this week with the enclosure, up until early next week, Taurus and Libras may want to be a little bit more careful if you're Taurus or Libra rising in particular. The other one would be people who have really prominent Venus placements in their chart. By that, I mean first house, 10th house, 7th house, or 4th house, or hugging one of the angles, the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, or the IC. Or someone who has like an exalted Venus in a good house, which would be like 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, and 11. If you have like prominent, like well dignified, like Venus in Pisces, Venus in Libra, Venus in Taurus, something like that. So it's hard to define concisely and quickly what a well dignified or prominent Venus is, because there's so many different, combinations, permutations of Venus in birth charts. But if you're someone who identifies with Venus a lot, if you have a strong Venus in your chart, when Venus goes through hard times, you may notice that different areas of your life relative to that placement in your birth chart are a bit more stressed or tense. Now, one of the things that just the simplest way of understanding what the enclosure means is that all Venusian things are going to potentially go through a higher degree of conflict, struggle, feelings of limitation, or kind of prohibitions coming up, the cosmic red light, confrontation and conflict. So you just have to know what kinds of Venus things are sort of in the air. Venus things would be, let's say anything involving art, beauty, women, love, romance, sexuality, the body to a certain extent, not the body so much as in health, but the body as in things that you might do or the appearance of the body, something like that. The other thing is that anytime that Venus is around and Venus wants something to be pleasant or easy or soft or gentle or enjoyable or something like that, it may not necessarily come as easily. You may just find that that's, Venus generally speaking is like, well, I'd like, how do you want things to go on your birthday? I want it to be beautiful outside. I want everyone to be happy. I want the food to be good. Like you want your day to be like, Venus has preferences when it comes to what defines happiness or what defines something that's pleasant or enjoyable or agreeable. And you may find that it's just not easy to get that done, or that you have to sort of tiptoe through difficulties. There was a song when I was a kid, I don't remember who it was by, but it was like the refrain, it was like, feels like you're walking on broken glass. Do you guys remember that song? It's a cheesy song, but this is a little bit what Venus is doing right now. Like Venus things may be taken by storm. And that could include like in the media too, like watch for anything Venus like getting sort of held up, contained, confined. Um, you know, uh, anything where there's anything where there's like a feeling of hostility and something or someone being sort of hemmed in by malefics with nowhere to go, people getting stuck, for example, in something, or you just have to be careful of things like that. Also things like ripping or tearing, or sort of breaking, that would be thought of as sort of beautiful. Be careful of dropping your vase of flowers. It's that, that has that kind of feeling around it. So a little bit of that energy is there right now. Now you could say just Venus is alchemically going through a shift. When Venus finally conjoins Mars, which is happening next week, then you're going to start to see relief, because Venus passes out of the kind of clutches of Saturn and Mars, and should be feeling a lot better and looking a lot better and so forth. So anyway, a little known concept called enclosure, malefic enclosure. You know, the it's nice that the new moon cycle that's coming this week is going to be helping us turn the corner with regard to the uh, the big T squares that we've gone through with both Venus and Mars previously, because at the very outset of this moon cycle, we see Venus and Mars getting together and the T square energy really starting to fade. The square between Saturn and Uranus is starting to fade. So some of the pressures of the past couple of months should really start to die down significantly in the next 2 weeks. All right. Well, that's what I've got for today. Hope that this was interesting for you. Remember, leave your stories in the comments section. If you want to share a story that I could possibly use in a future episode, put hashtag grabbed, and then, tell us your story and make sure you mention which planets or which aspect you're correlating your story with. All right. That's what I've got for today. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.